Hello, welcome to the Winners Find a Way show, special edition. It is Veterans Day, and I am with my good friend Jeremy Spann, Sergeant in the Marine Corps. Jeremy Spann, fired up about my TCU alum, and joining me today. Jeremy, how are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks for reaching out to get me on the show. I'm always excited when you and I always get fired up when you and I start talking. Like I'm like I used to be swift, silent, and deadly in the Marine Corps. Now I'm slow, fat, and harmless. But I want to go back and be swift, silent, and deadly again every time I talk with you.
It's I appreciate that. I gotta remember that, like swift, silent, and deadly. That's what I'm going for, by the way. But I am excited about Veterans Day, and when Jeremy talks about us getting together, we're friends. He runs 11 companies in the Fort Worth area and all over Texas. He is a Texan at heart, TCU grad, both undergrad and his master's, his MBA. Longtime Marine, and left the Marines as a sergeant in 1997. Although you never leave the Marines, right? Like we're never
No,
out.
it's Marine, always Marine. Once
Yeah, that's right.
Retarded, right?
That's everyone tells me it, man. Like so, truth. But yeah, always just Jeremy. One of the things I love about you and I, we get down at it. Jeremy is a podcast host and has a show called Winning Strategies Playbook. Definitely want to check that out. I have been a guest on his show and been the fortunate end of that show. And man, I'm grateful and honored because it is a fabulous show. And Jeremy just continues to bring that knowledge and give back into his community. So for me, no one better for Veterans Day to bring in my man, Jay Spann. So I'm excited, Sergeant. Let's get at this.
Let's do it. Thanks again.
Yeah. So you and I are fellow entrepreneur organization members. I'm not sure, like when you left the Marine Corps in '97, like, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because you sign on and head off to school, bust your butt, become a city manager in Fort Worth. Is that your hometown? Is that where you're from?
No. I was Fort Worth PD.
Oh, you were PD. Okay.
Yeah. So
so you went right into the police department. Okay. Were you going to school while you were in the police department, or did you do that before?
Yeah, no. So it's really interesting. So I hired on Fort Worth in 90. Yeah, it was right after I got out of the Marines in 97, and it was interesting because I had an incident, and that incident almost got me fired. It wasn't anything bad or anything else. It was just an incident, and which was really interesting because I was like, man, I need to get an education, because I'd originally dropped out of high school. Wow. When I was in the Marines at 17, mom and dad had to sign for me to go in the Marines, because I wasn't old enough to sign up. So I was young in my boot camp class when I graduated #1 out of boot camp. I was the platoon honor man, and so I had a really just very great career in the Marines. And then when I got out and I was in the PD and I had this incident, and I was like, man, I need to get an education. Yeah. So I was working 8 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, and then going home, shower, go to school till about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I did that for 4.5 years.
This is one of the things, Jeremy, I think young adults miss this, man. Like you've got to learn to work hard, and you got to cut your teeth. I know my first job, I was shoveling snow and delivering newspapers, doing anything to make money as a kid. And then, as an adult, as a college graduate, I took a job for no money because I knew the experience would just serve on my resume, right? Like I had to go work with a professional baseball team, and they paid me zero. They did give me a pat on the back. That wasn't bad. And actually I ended up doing okay, because the players who knew I was just, hungry kid with, literally hungry. And they were like, man, I'd find like a couple $100 in my pot in my locker some days, because they knew I was serving them and working hard. And they were like, man, this kid's getting nothing. And man, I found ways to pay rent with a couple tips from the players, man. And I was so grateful. But that's what it took. And man, like 15-hour days, like, yeah, you're just getting started. Like, so when I hear Jeremy Spann, the owner of 11 companies, like you're a hardworking man, and man, what's a day-to-day look like for you, man?
Oh man. So, I get up at 4 in the morning. I have a lot of people go, well, you get up at 4 in the morning because you're in the Marines. You like getting up at 4 in the morning. I'm like, let me tell you, if there's anybody on this planet that despises getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it is this guy. But you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Some of the things I tell everybody in my business is we say what we need to say, not what we want to say. And we do what we need to do, not what we want to do. And you got to make the grind. You got to be successful because at 8 a.m., the phone starts blowing up with problems, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that 4 hours before there, getting all that focus work done, you're not going to get it done at 8 a.m. because when you got 11 companies, you got 11 problems that start at 8 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So give me that quote again. Give me that quote what you just said one more
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
what we want,
Yeah,
what we
yeah, yeah.
need.
You say what you need to say, not what you want to say, and you do what you need to do, not what you want to do. And it's
Yes.
hard. It's showing restraint and patience. I'm not a patient person, right? Like culture index.
Yeah.
Like I'm as low of a C trade as you can get. Like everything is right now. So it takes an absorbent amount of energy for me to demonstrate patience and restraint. And matter of fact, some of the guys in my companies, they laugh as they go, man, there's no one that takes an MFing like you do. And you just sit there, right? And then I just sit there as somebody spewing and telling me stuff. And then when they're done, I just respond, not react. Always
Yeah.
respond. Don't react. Say what you need to say, not what you want to say. And I keep a calm, patient voice. And, when people start talking louder, I start talking quieter
Yeah.
because
Bring them down.
talking quiet, when you're speaking quieter, people have to stop talking to listen.
Yeah, that's good, man. That right there, for so many people who have never led, who've never managed, most people don't do well at that, right? In leadership, we talk a lot about that. Most leaders didn't go to school for leadership and they didn't go to school for coaching, right? And
Yeah.
now it's like, whoa, hey, you got to do all this leadership and coaching. Like, what's your experience in that? Like, oh, I don't know. Well, and if you're lucky, like, hey, I worked for a guy like Jeremy Spann. I learned some things. Okay, so you can model some things, but I know with 11 companies, your employees aren't with you all the time. So they get to see you maybe 10, 15% of the time. Am I really now prepared to get out there and lead? Because I've been around a good leader a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that plays. And I know some of those skills will transition over, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that's a challenge. But, I see so many people today. I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, what we need, and that's a challenge that I told my kids. I have a 24-year-old, now a grandson, Jeremy, by the way.
You're a
And
grandfather
yeah,
now?
yeah, thanks. And so, when you think about that, like I've told them since they were little, man, like this country is awesome, right? And we don't have any more needs in this country. We just have wants. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Like, you look around, and both my wife have been blessed and fortunate to be college educated, and we have the fortitude to work. And so no matter what happens in this economy or anything else, we can figure that out. Like, winners will find a way, and we will find a way to get it done. But when this is like, you look around, you don't have any more needs here. They're met. We have
Yeah.
wants, and that's it. And man, we've just embraced this. Say what you want, do what you want. Everybody else needs to just come along. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm down with that, because I don't, if we all do and say what we want, like, watch out. It's
Oh, no.
whoa, this is gonna get ugly.
It's really interesting you say that, Trent. It is I raised my daughter, and it's really funny because my daughter's 21 now, right? And she's in
Oh yeah,
college, or I joke around.
legal age to drink.
Yeah, yeah. So people go, your daughter's in college, and I make jokes. I say, well, she's at college. This is the difference between being in school and at school,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But she's figuring it out,
Yeah.
and so I'll give you an example. Is last Christmas. So I spend half my year at my house up in the mountains. Like you said, it's very hard. It's very challenging to lead all these companies, and I'm not even in Texas most of the time.
Yeah.
Not just in Colorado, but traveling all over the place. And so you've got to trust in people and lead them in a fashion where they're going to do what they need to do, even though you're not even here. And so raising my daughter, I raised her to say there are no mistakes. There's learning opportunities. Now, the first time it happens, if you repeat that, then that becomes a mistake and you need to accept accountability for that. But make it a learning opportunity, right? Go out and do your thing, learn, right? And it's okay. Life is not easy. It's going to be painful.
Yeah.
Guess what? Time on this planet is limited. God's going to punch your ticket someday, right? And when it does, it's over like that, lights out, right? It's no more.
Yeah.
And so I said, just learn your way through life. So last Christmas, you know, my brother-in-law, who's a colonel in the Army still, he's a so calm guy, comes in with his wife and kids. I have my in-laws, and I have great in-laws, man. Most people don't like their in-laws. I love my in-laws.
Yeah.
And so we're there, and we take everybody back to the airport, and my daughter stayed for a couple extra days before she went back to Fort Collins. And we were, you know, she was like, man, Dad, everybody was up my butt, man. Everybody going, what are you going to major in? What are you going to be in life? Where are you going?
Yeah.
Direction, all of this. And she goes, you never say anything. And I said, honey, it's your life to live. I just want you to be happy. I said, first off, I dropped out of high school at 17. You actually made it to college. I was like, man, I'm grateful for that. And I was like, whatever you think you're going to be today, it's going to change 10 times. I mean, I thought I was going to be in the Marines forever. I thought I was going to be a cop forever. And then I thought I was going to do this and that. I mean, if you would have told me over 30 years ago, I'd be where I'm at right now, I would have looked at you cross-eyed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, you're it's okay. You're going to fail. Good friend of mine, Brian Scudamore, right? You know,
sure. You know, I was a 1-800 Got Junk owner. Yeah. I was a franchisee.
Man, I remember, you know, we haven't talked in a long time, but the last time we were sitting there talking, you know, his book, WTF, Willing to Fail. And we were sitting there talking, and he was just like, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You know, you're going to do things and figure it out. And you look for people that have that give, right? Not the take. A lot of people are takers. I'm looking for the givers. And so it's interesting when you said, you know, going to work for free. So, you know, I'm the largest landlord of off-campus TCU student housing. And one of my former tenants who ultimately became, in his senior year, my intern, and then he graduated and went and got a job. Well, right now, he's going to give me the answer today, actually, of all days on Veterans Day, is if he's going to take my job offer, and he's going to take a $25,000 pay cut to come work for me.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because that's where the entry level position is. But I was like, I think you're going to do great, and you will exceed what you're currently making if you come in, but the knowledge you're going to get, the experience you're going to get. And he goes, man, I'm going to take a week to think about this. And I said, you should. There's a lot of risk. Any of my companies can end on any day, right?
All of us can end on any day, right? So, like, you know, it's fragile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I said, so there's a lot of risk in this position. So you should take a moment to think about it. And I'm pretty sure he's going to give me a yes, right?
Yeah.
Because if he wasn't, he would have told me no already.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, you're this police officer, and then, you know, you start a couple side hustles, and those aren't really making money, but you're like, that's it. I'm quitting my day job with a daughter, with a wife, and you decide like, hey, I'm going to go into this. What's on your mind at that point? Are you thinking like, hey, man, this is a great idea? What, you know, where are you at that moment?
Yeah. So I don't think I thought a lot. You know, I when I believe in something, I believe it. And normally it is, I have what I say is I don't just believe in it, but I have the data to back it up. It's like being a Marine, right? Yeah. Is when you become a Marine, you're earning the title of those that came before you, those that proved it long before you. The Marine Corps is an ethos, right? And that's the reason we always say, once Marine, always Marine. You're not an ex-Marine or any of that, because there's this belief system. Like we're cannon fodder in combat, right? You know, that's why they send the Marines first. They're like, man, they'll carry heavy stuff and get shot at. Yeah. And because we believe, and actually how we got our name, our nickname, Devil Dog, was at the Battle of Bella Wood, right? And so here it is, you're in a world war, and the Germans hear these Marines. They heard them before they saw them coming at them, and they were all like, they were barking like dogs. And that's where they said Tufahunden, which is German for the devil dog, right?
Yeah.
Dog of the devil, because they sounded like these satanic dogs coming. And it's just Marines are always recognized because it's a belief system. And so I felt it, I believed it. And you know what? I'm talking to a 3-time World Series guy.
Yeah.
You don't win games by being on the sidelines.
Yeah.
You don't win things like C.T. Fletcher. You ever heard of C.T. Fletcher?
I don't think I have.
Oh, yeah. So he used to be the world's strongest man.
Okay.
And so he had a heart attack, and the doctors told him, you're never going to lift weights again. And he said, watch this. And he became the strongest man title again. And, but he was like, the show could stop because I'm here. I am the one. I'm going to stand on that top pedestal. Y'all can fight over second and third, but this first place is for me. And you don't get there by sitting on the sidelines. You got to commit. You got to make the jump, because if you don't, you're going to be an observer. That's it.
Yeah, I think that, let's talk about, you hire a lot of ex-military people that you knew have been in there. I hire a lot of ex-athletes because I know what they've been in, and and I know a lot of folks that go after folks because they understand prioritization, they understand time management, they understand that they may get kicked in the teeth and get knocked down, and they're going to get back up, right?
Yep.
And so they've got some resiliency, and coachability is pretty high, right? We've been trained, and so there's a lot of skill sets. Talk to me a little bit about why that's been important for you, and to further that along and further people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's real easy to do with vets, right? Is to be involved in something that's bigger than you, right? Kind of like athletes, right? No one person wins a World Series. It takes a team. You got to be committed to something more than yourself. You got to not be in order to be selfless, right? And with vets, it's easy for me to find, because that's basically what I've done. Is I've translated what it was like to be a part of something bigger than ourselves in the military to doing that in business. And that's why, but you got to show up, right? Like, as the leader of the group, you got to demonstrate that you're never going to ask them to do anything that you haven't already done or willing to do. You got to outwork them, and that's what I do. I mean, the running joke in our company is like, there's not enough hours in the day, or what did Dustin say the other day? He goes, there's only 24 hours in a day, and Spann doesn't sleep. He goes, so if you're going to work 20 hours, he's going to work 21. If you work 21, he's going to work 22. If you work 20, if we're both working 24 hours a day, then nobody's sleeping. But you have to do that, because if you're going to be a leader, you got to demonstrate that. But it doesn't take a lot of it doesn't take a lot to get them to understand it. And then the civilians that I have, the people that didn't serve in the military, they see that, and you demonstrate it, and it's just it's really phenomenal to just watch it come together and watch them do these amazing things. And a lot of people dig on the younger generation, and I'm fascinated by the younger generation. I think that there's a lot of weird things going on, right? A lot of whatevers, but man, the ones that clearly stick out.
Yeah.
And they think different, and they do different, and they're really just fascinating. Like my daughter, right? She's figuring out life. But the fact that right now she's figuring out on her own, in a state, in a city where she doesn't have any infrastructure, you have to find those things that you go, wow, that's really impressive. Is she making all the decisions I want her to make? No, not at all,
Yeah.
But she's doing it on her own. And that's fascinating, because she grew up in this very good life. And she was like, I'm going to leave that life. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure it out on my own. And that's where, those are the things that we have to pay attention to, right? You got to leave all the other stuff alone and go, wow, what is it that they're doing that is really impressive? And yeah, it's really great. I look at these kids now and I'm like, man, they're actually smarter than we were at their age, right?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is like they're really, they're really in tune to money, right? Which is really interesting, like savings and like how a Roth IRA works, and like, I don't want to do that. They're watching their dollars closely, and I think that's probably a little bit because I look at my like 20-year-old, 21-year-old who's like really tight, right? And he makes some decent money, and he's gonna, he's on that entrepreneur track, man. Like he's a hard worker, and he's of the mind that, my guess is he watched us in 08 to 10, right? When things went really rough, and he was, 7 to 11 years old during that time, those 4 really rough years of, man, dad lost his job for 10 months, right? Like, hey, there's an unemployment line and I'm going. And you gotta face that in your life. And he's gotta see that, like, no, we're not going out. It's gonna be sandwiches. It's gonna be, like, we're gonna eat. We're not going out. And I think that generation has grasped a little bit like that, like my father did, coming out of a Great Depression kind of guy
Yeah.
as a kid. And so it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. But one of the things like I love, when these bodies of team members come together is, I'm always looking for that person who go the extra mile, right? And we got these leaders, and most of the organizations that I work with, that leader is always the hardest worker. And in fact, it's very interesting because no one really wants to be the hardest worker in the company and not be at the top. Like it actually demotivates them to work hard. If I work hard for the person who's at the top, who never works, who's never around and never doing anything and never contributing to the greater good, other than maybe a smile and the corporate speech every quarter, right? So it's a very different environment. But I'm asking people to do hard things, and I'm waiting for the people that say, I will. I will do the trash. Hey, we've lost our custodial services. I'll clean this place twice a week. I
Yeah.
will. And I don't, and then the very people who want to get promoted come in and go, Trent, how come you don't think Jeremy brought me up? And I said, well, he asked you guys 5 hard things. And Dustin over here stood up 4 of those 5 times and said, I will. And then the other times, Tricia stood up and said, I will. And then you never stood up and said, I will, man. Like, so when is it going to be? When are you going to actually come in and take that over?
Yeah. And it's really interesting you say that, because I had 2 incredible examples growing up. First off was my grandfather. I still got his, portrait on the wall here. He was Omaha beach landing in World War II. He's Korean War. My dad, Vietnam vet. And my dad, when he signed for me to go in the Marines, right? And I think he was like, at that point, I think he was frustrated. He was like, man, he's your all's problem now. I got tired of kicking his ass 6 months ago.
Was he a police officer at that time too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was
He's like, hey man, I don't want to put my own kid in cuffs, so why don't you guys take him?
I'm going to choke him out. Y'all take him, right? But my dad said, he goes, look, volunteer for every job. No matter how bad, how dirty it is, just take it, because it's a learning opportunity, but you're going to demonstrate that you're willing to do anything. And I did, like you're talking about, whether it's clean the toilet, whatever, right? And then the other example, my grandfather, so there's this, you see this purple hovercraft sitting right here behind me. It's a G.I. Joe hovercraft. And I'll tell you the funny story behind that is when I was in the 3rd grade, and, I had to do this autobiography project. And so my grandfather, who lived with us, goes, what are you working on? And I was like, well, I got to do this stupid school project. School's stupid. I hate school. School's stupid, right? And
yeah.
And he's like, here's a man, Omaha beach landing, looking at this 3rd grader, like, and he goes, you know what? I'll make you a deal. He goes, what do you really want? And, G.I. Joe was real big during the time. I was like, oh, Papa, man, a G.I. Joe hovercraft, that would be the coolest thing in the world. And he goes, if you get an A, I'll buy you a hovercraft. And I was like, what? So I solicited my mom, right? Mom, you got to help me with this project. I got to get an A. And then so, I worked all week on it. I turned it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't just get any sleep. I was like, man, I got to get an A on this. And then so the teacher, in the beginning of class, it's like, hey, I'll hand out your stuff at the end of class. And I was like, man, are you kidding me? I gotta wait. And then when she handed it out, I remember just sitting there and I was terrified to open it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and then I opened it and it was an A+, right? And I couldn't even think. And I rode the bus home and it was like the longest bus drive ever. And I remember because, we lived way out in the country and lived down this long dirt road. And I was running from the bus back to the house. Matter of fact, I ate it. I shoveled a bunch of gravel in my face, and I walk in the door and my grandfather's at his desk. He's taking a little cat nap. And I was like, Papa. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, hey, you need to get your keys and we need to go down. You're going to buy me this hovercraft right now. Look, I got an A. And he's like, well, all right, well, hold on. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I did my part. It's time for you to do your part. Let's go right now.
Yeah.
And he goes, sit down. And I was like, well, okay, because my grandfather says, sit down.
Yeah. That voice.
And he's looking through it. And he looks over at me. He reaches under the desk and pulls out the hovercraft. And I was confused. I was like, you already had the hovercraft? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, look, I knew you were going to do it. And even on the quote right here, if you put your mind to it, there's nothing you can't do. And it's TCU purple, right? Because that toy became like all toys. And it became something that just got thrown out. So I told this same story to my MBA class at TCU. And my friend Jason Kramer was inspired by the story. And he went and he found a hovercraft and painted it purple, put it in this case, put the quote on it. And this was Christmas of 2014. And he brought it over in all wrapped up. And when I opened it up and I saw it, I started to tear up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was just speechless. He goes, I was so inspired by your story. And he goes, and now I understand you. It's from the third grade. You've believed that there's nothing you can't do because somebody believed in you. And all it takes is one person to believe in you. I mean, it's great if you have 100, but you just need one.
Yeah.
And because of that belief, look, it hasn't been, all sugar canes and everything else, right? Yeah. I've lost money, right? I've lost it all before. This year was a challenge year. I personally had to write more than $1 million worth of checks to several of my businesses because of the mistakes that we made. That's a lot of money. But if you would have told me 30 years ago that I had the ability to take out a pen and write $1 million worth of checks, I'd have been like, I can't even comprehend $1 million. And now $1 million doesn't even seem like anything to me. Actually, there's no denomination. People are like, what's the goal? And I'm like, it has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
It has to do with success. It has to do with how can I bring other people up, right? How do they make it to the show, right? How do they come up out of the leagues and make it to the pros, and how do they make it to the World Series, and watching them work together. So one of our companies, Stacks, right? Stacks Property Services, and watching them. We had a retreat back in October up at a place in Colorado, and watching them come together even closer. All vets, right? Well, we got one Army guy. Everybody else Marines. We got one Army guy, Army Ranger, because we needed somebody that knew how to read and write. My
shirt here is actually a SEAL shirt, by the way.
Right? Yeah.
I went to the SEAL Museum down in Fort Pierce, so we like them too.
A lot of rivalry between recon Marines and SEALs, right? Although we all go to Coronado to do our same training, right?
Yeah.
Except we used to steal their stuff all the time. It was great. And or acquire, as we said in the Marines. We didn't really steal, we just acquired things. And and watching them come together. And, and one of the most exciting things that happens at any of my companies is when I have to call them, not because anything other than to tell them a funny joke or, hey, how are you doing? Because They don't have to call me anymore. They're doing it. They're running it.
Yeah.
So that's why I tell people is I'm like, I have 11 companies, but I really don't run 11 companies because they all run them. I
Yeah.
don't have to run them.
You believe in them.
I believe in them,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's so much here, man, Jeremy. There's so much right here, like it's crazy. And one of the things that I remember reading a story about an entrepreneur, and he's a friend of mine actually, and he was telling his story, and named Peter Thomas, and he wrote a book called Never Fight with a Pig. And he talked about how he had, he bought Century 21 Canada when he was like 25 years old for $100,000, and he only had 10. So the guy took it and said, "Hey, you'll owe me 90." Right. And then he sold it for $33 million in like 5 years. Right. Like crazy, and you're just like, whoa, this guy and then he lost the money. And I remember having this conversation. I was reading the book. I was probably like 27 years old. I was with my brother-in-law, and I remember we were sitting at this. We were actually at the Rose Bowl, and I was like, "Man, this dude, you got to be stupid, man. Like, how do you lose $33 million, right? Like, how do you lose $33 million?" He goes, "Man, that's awesome." Yeah, awesome. No, you didn't hear. He lost $33 million, and he goes, "Had $33 million to lose."
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, you got a point, man. So when you say I can't even imagine back in 1997, I got to write $1 million for, missteps that we made. Listen, I've had 10, 15 years of positive cash flow, productivity, we've done a lot of things right. And we misstep, and I got to do this. And no, it doesn't feel great. No, it's not comfortable, but I have the ability to do it. And it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. So it was, yesterday being Marine Corps birthday, 247 years, I believe. Right. And so James, you remember James,
Sure. I know James. Yeah.
He calls me and he says, "Hey, happy birthday, Marine. I just want to thank you for always pushing in me and believing in me and doing it." And I was like, "Man, you made it easy to believe in you, though. This guy can sell. Dude, he could go to Guantanamo Bay, open the cell door to a terrorist who's being waterboarded 15 times a day and sell that guy water." Right. It's just amazing what he can do with people because he's just talented. He's actually so talented that it annoys me. Right. I don't, that's the reason I brought the guy with me. Yeah. Right. But he's just so talented that I'm like, man, I'm great at sales, but he's greater. Yeah. And he's natural at it. Like I got to work at it. Right. Yeah. He doesn't have to work at it. You go to him and you're like, I don't know, sell. It was interesting because it's one of my favorite books. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. You go, hey, go sell 1 million of these books. He'd do it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Or like Ricky, my longest friend, right? We enlisted in the Marines together, friends since the 2nd grade. And he made the jump. So when we got out of the Marines, he became a cop too. And then he retired out of that and was teaching high school. And I said, "Hey, come with me." And he left the security of doing that. Yeah. And he was like, yeah. And and this year was a challenging year. I think, and it's really funny. I don't think I've talked to one single person that said 2022. Like they go, 2022 is really made 2020 its bitch, right? Right. Like the COVID year of pandemic when everything closed down doesn't hold a candle to 2022. But the thing is even though it's had a lot of challenges, I embrace it, right? And I'm like, man, but look at all the things we learned, what to do and what not to do. And it's one of the reasons why when we started with acquisitioning TCU off-campus houses, we started off with 8 and we had a year's worth of case studies and I had enough to go to investors. And it only took us 9 months to scale to 45 to become the largest holder of houses off campus. And we're still cooking, right? Like we'll be 100 by the end of by midsummer. And people are like, "How are you doing it?" And I was like, well, when you demonstrate that you walk the walk, those that are sitting on the sidelines, they start paying attention. And the ones that have been sitting on the sidelines, you pay attention to the ones that go, "I don't want to sit on the sidelines anymore. Yeah. I want to give you money or I want to invest in you, or I
Yeah.
want to be with you, to be a part of you. And they come along, and watching Ricky, develop his acumen, watching Dustin, right? The old Army Ranger, watching his progress over the last 90 days has just been fascinating. But you got to believe in people, and you got to give them the runway, right? And that's hard to do as a leader. It is so hard to do as a leader, is to step back and go, okay, go, and you're sitting there watching them sometimes go towards the wall, and you're like, please don't go towards the wall, but you got to let them. You got to let them.
Let's talk. I mean, let's talk James for a second, right? You just said if you don't give him the runway, how would you ever discover his talent for sales? Because you could always go like, "Hey, I've got a great talent for sales. Let me show you how it's done. Let me show you how it's done." Well, I don't want to risk this sale because you need to just watch me through this. You learned that he has this talent by giving him the room to do it, and you were like, "Wait a minute. That's a pretty good deal. Like, I should be doing it that way. Wait a minute. I like that right there." Like, and so it's one of these things when you surround yourself with people that are willing to get in the game.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to find out that, listen, the people coming out of I'm going to use football because TCU is great right now, right?
Yeah.
They're hot.
Oh, yeah.
And listen, like, you take a look on the field. Like, the jerseys are dirty. There's blood coming out of the nose, man. You're scraped up. You're limping, and it's tough out there. Like it's not for the faint at heart. Like you want to come out into this game and step in the size. Come ready. And this is probably my biggest challenge for the media that kind of that paints this picture like, hey, get a website. You're in business. Entrepreneurship is easy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this game, like, I don't know if you've been punched in the nose 5 times, but you should go do that with your hands behind your back and then go, okay, I think I'm ready for this now. Because if you don't want that and you can't take that, I don't know if this game's for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And it's really important, and football is a great analogy for this. And we really learned this in the Marines. I learned it in the PD. Well, it was reinforced in the PD. I'd already learned it in the Marines. Is you're never out of the fight unless you choose to be out of the fight.
Yeah.
Right. It's not over until it's over. Stay in the fight. Like I remember when I was going through the police academy, and there was 30 of us in our class. 22 of us were vets. Of the 22 vets, 15 of us were Marines. And there was another Force Recon Marine, Greg Jones, big dude, towered over everybody. So it came time for boxing. And the instructor was like, hey, who's got Golden Gloves experience? I was the only one to raise my hand. And they were like, okay, you get to pick who you want. I said, I want Jones. And everybody turned around and looked at me. He was like, man,
like, what are you doing?
Class. Why are you gonna pick the biggest dude? And I totally talked trash to him for a week. I was like, man, I'm going to dust you. And even if I don't, there's no way I lose here. He's like, no, you're going to lose. I said, no, there is no loss. I'm fighting the biggest dude in class. If you win, you're the biggest dude in class. Of course you won. But if I win, the loudest dude in class beat you. And he told me later, right? He was like, man, I started getting a little nervous because, man, you were getting in my head. So we get there in the day, like we're up there on the speed bag, and, it's a technique. So he's trying to, big old bear paws trying to hit this thing. And I'm over there hitting it right. And he's like, man, he tells me later, he's like, man, this guy really does know how to do this. Then we get on the heavy bag, right? And he's like, well, I can't hit that hard though. I'm bigger than him. And he saw me working the heavy bag. He's like, man, he's got some pretty solid punches on that thing. So we get into the ring, right? And when they ring the bell, my strategy was I'm just going to let him get tired because he's a big guy. It's going to get tired. So as soon as they did it, I hit him with an uppercut, and man, I tucked in, right? And I was taking the blows, right? I knew how to take the hits, and I could feel towards the end of the first round they were getting softer and softer and softer.
Yeah.
And so we go to the second round, and so the guy, the coach in my corner is like, dude, you got a shot at the big guy. He goes, wear him out on the second one. So we get in there, and instead of I fake an uppercut, but I come down and I hit him with a hook. Right? Didn't ring his bell too much, but it was enough to piss him off where he's just wailing me, throwing some haymakers. And I felt him getting softer and softer. But like all good plans, Trent, not everything goes according to plan. So
Right.
he got frustrated and he towers over me. So he hammer fists me on top of my head. And it caused me to bounce my head out of my guard. And when my head came out of my guard, oh, he rang my bell hard.
Yeah.
And man, the hits were coming. So it was towards the end of the second round, and we finish up, and I'm over in the corner, and the coach is like, "Dude, he's done. Go get him." I was like, "Sure, no problem. Which one is?" I see like 15 of them right now.
Which one do I hit?
Yeah. And he spent the third round just whooping my ass from one side of the ring to the next, right? So it was all said and done. Everybody was like, because he told me, he was like, "Man, when your head came out of the guard, I knew that I had to take my shot because there was no way I was going to make it the third round." And everybody's like, "Why did you fight Greg?" And I was like, "Well, for 3 reasons." I said, first off, I wanted everybody here to see that I fear no man except for my father. He's the only one I've ever feared. I will always fear, even if he's 80 years old in a wheelchair, and he's pretty close to 80, but he's not in the wheelchair. And so I said, I want everybody to see that I'm not scared of anybody, and I'll fight to the death with you. And I said, the second reason is when you get on the radio and you call for help and you hear me coming, you know I'm coming. And I didn't say anything. And then finally somebody goes, "Well, what was the third reason?" I said, the third reason was the most important. And they said, "What was that reason?" I said, "Man, I hadn't had a good ass whooping in a while. And sometimes you need one to put perspective on stuff."
Hey, I want to dive into that because it's funny. We talk about today now, like comforts and this and that, and you've got an interesting take on you know perspective versus perception, right? And it's always, I've probably said the 1,000 times, perception's reality, right? Because
Mhm.
people get perception on people, and then it becomes their reality. Whether it's true or not, that's a whole nother matter, right? But man, you and I talked about as athletes, as military, we develop a prioritization perspective because we realize, like, you can't do it all. I've got to decide where my best contributions, where my best energies are going to be spent to help this unit, this organization be the best it can be. And I can't be the sales guy, the marketing guy, the banker, it can't be it all. So how am I going to service best? And same thing on the field. So talk to me a little bit about your position on perspective versus perception.
Yeah, I think it's critical, right? Because perception is reinforced by bias, emotions, feelings, experience, things like that. But perspective is when you ask questions, right? Is so, and funny enough, the obstacle is the way, right? Is I've read this book, and this is not an exaggeration, 100 times. I've
Really?
given out. I got a whole stack of them right here behind me. I hand them out. I make
Dude, yeah,
everybody
I
like,
love that, man. How come Clark's never been on that mailing list, man?
"What's that?"
I said, how come Clark never got on that mailing list,
And you
man?
know what? I'm gonna send one to you.
I love
Right?
it.
I'm gonna send one to you today.
All
It's
right.
coming. I'm gonna, as soon as we finish this, I'm gonna send one to you today because it
Happy
really.
Veterans Day to me, bro. That's a
Yeah, I
big
know,
deal.
right? Hey, I need to get you a recon t-shirt so that way you're not wearing one of those, silly ass seals t-shirts.
That's seal BS. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So perspective is when something or someone happens, which is going to happen. Most of the time, people allow their perception to occur, and then they act, don't act, accept, don't accept, so forth. Perspective is when something or someone happens, go ahead and accept it. It's already done. It's in the past, right? Accept it and then ask questions. What can I learn from this? What can I take away from this? Is there anything within my control? And if it's not within my control, is there a workaround? And if there's no control and no workaround, then leave it alone because you're a hamster on a wheel, spending a whole lot of time and energy going nowhere real quick, right?
Yeah.
Learn and observe from it what you can take away. And so we have a saying in our companies called the Quadrant of Death. and there's
I want
4.
that t-shirt too, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
Quadrant of
really,
Death, man. You
yeah,
got
we
t-shirts
supposed to do
made or
that.
what?
You and I build another company together, and we sell these T-shirts, right?
Believe
Quadrant
it,
of
bro.
Death. And so the quadrant of death is ego, entitlement, blame, shame. And if you're operating in any one of those, that's not good. If you're operating in 2 of the 4 at any time, that's bad. If you're operating in 3 of the 4, that is dangerous. And if you're operating in 4 of the 4, it's catastrophic. So we have a saying in the company, and we call it, like, in the military, you have what's called ceasefire, right? So if somebody witnesses an unsafe situation, they say ceasefire, ceasefire, and everybody starts repeating ceasefire, ceasefire, and everybody stops, but looks around, and then you adjust the situation. We had the same thing. Is anytime, and they can do it to me because I found myself in the quadrant at times, right?
Sure.
And so, hey, you're in the quadrant. Get out of the quadrant. Ego's the biggest one that I fall in, right? And so
Why
they're
it's
like,
number one, right?
oh,
That's why
man.
it's number one, because we
Yeah,
go easy. It's easy to
it's
get there.
it's easy to get there, but the biggest one we see a lot of times is blame, right? You're blaming. Why are you blaming, right? Well, that person did me wrong. Okay, maybe they did. Are you going to live in this I'm angry blaming? And so what you have to do is I have a very structured morning, and I'm not a structured person. I hate routines. I mean, like on Culture Index, I'm a low D, right? I'm a nonconformist. I hate rule. I don't want to break any laws because I don't want to go to jail, but I want to break all the rules, right? It's a typical entrepreneur. I want to disrupt, but I have to be structured in my morning routine. And you and I talked about it on our show, right? When you recorded with me, is the Oak Journal, right? So I start my 10-10-10 off of, I use an app called Calm, and it's 10 minutes of just breathing and meditation, which is really hard. I found it easier to be trained to be one of the best killers on the planet, to go kill enemies, than it is to sit there for 10 minutes and focus and breathe and block everything out of your head. It's exhausting, right? It's hard, but I reinforce and I still do it. And sometimes I got all these thoughts coming in, but I still do the 10 minutes. Then I do my 10 minutes of journaling. Then I do my 10 minutes of reading, right? So here, another EO or Vern Harnish, right? Scaling up, right? Yep. And so that's been my book here that I've been working on for my 10-10-10, but I breathe. And so when something or someone happens, I pause and I remember to breathe, because it's going to be okay. Because you want to know when it's not okay? When someone's punched your ticket.
Yeah.
The only person that decides our ticket's going to get punched is the man upstairs. He's already predetermined that. Matter of fact, I think it's one of the reasons I've been alive for almost 50 years now. Half a century is because I'm cable TV for God. He's like, man, I can't let him go because he's goofy stuff.
This channel's too good.
It's too good. It's too good, right? But you just got to breathe. Just remember to breathe. Like people would say, like, man, like, when the enemy's shooting at you and bombs are going off and everything else, how do you stay so calm? And I was like, you just breathe, right? Because people are just spraying and praying, shooting all over the place. Just breathe, look up, acquire your target, squeeze the trigger, go back down, breathe, get up. Look at the same thing in business. What is the current target? Breathe, acquire, get your sight alignment, squeeze the trigger, take that next target down, and then stay calm, because I of course, being a Marine, right? Water's the most powerful thing on the planet. It's the biggest necessity on the planet, right? You can go without eating, but you can't go without hydration, right? You're an athlete. I mean, you kind of been to the World Series a handful of times and stuff, right? Yeah. You got to hydrate. Well, water is also a powerful entity because it'll just go anywhere, right? I mean, tsunamis, look at them. And people go, well, I think fire is worse. And I was like, no, because fire's got to have fuel. And when you take the fuel out, it's got nothing to burn.
Yep.
Right? So if you're in a tense situation, Why fuel the fire? Why raise your voice? Why yell? Why add more fuel to it? Remain calm. So when a young man I'm mentoring is dealing with a difficult employee situation, he's like, man, I think this guy's crazy, but I need to terminate him. And so last week when he was like, man, I just need to fire him today. And I says, no, give it a few days. And he goes, why? I already know that I'm going to fire him. And I said, yeah, but you know what? No matter how justified you are in terminating an employee, even your best employees even if you have 100 people in a company and 99 go, that guy needs to be fired. When you fire that person, it has a reaction to everybody because they immediately not feel safe, even if they are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I said, what you're doing is you're demonstrating restraint, and that you're going to gather all the information. You're going to talk to all the employees, and you're going to interview everybody, and you're going to do that. I'm not saying don't do it, but when you demonstrate that restraint, what you're doing is you're saying, we made a decision that we needed to make as a company, but I'm not leaving you with the feeling of feeling unsafe. Show that restraint, show that patience, show that, right? But you have to show that. So just breathe, be calm.
Yeah, that's so good. Let me go real quick on the quadrant of death. Give me your scoring on that, right? I
Yeah.
know the ego, entitlement, blame, shame. We talked about the 4 losing behaviors on your show, right?
Yeah.
And then when one's happening, it's what? One of
Not
the 4?
good.
Not good. 2 happens.
Bad.
3 happens.
Dangerous.
Danger. 4 happens.
Catastrophic. Don't ask me how to spell catastrophic.
That's all I got. So yeah, I mean, it's I think organizations, I mean, I do this for a living, right?
Yeah.
So, I go into organizations, and my guess is that at any given moment, they probably called me because 2 are going on, and likely 3, right? Because it's like, whoa, this is all going on, and it's like, whoa, we got to get this taken care of. We got to get out of this quadrant because, like, it's not good, and this behavior's not okay. I mean, and ego is probably it's such a tough one to always see it, identify it, know this is what it is. But blame is, crazy. Entitlement is prevalent, and those 2 ones. And then, of course, the shame one is a scary one, right? Because when people get in a shame cycle, really bad things happen, right? Because we're not thinking in our right mind. Because when you're in a shame cycle, that little voice is telling you things that just aren't even logical. It's not making sense. But usually we're listening to that little voice in that cycle, like it's prevalent, like it's the loudest voice in the shame cycle. Like, yeah, you're lousy, you don't belong here, you're not anything, you're awful. And you're like, yeah, the depression kicks in and these things happen. So it's bonkers, man. But let me pivot to, one thing, very, very interesting about you is, like, you used to jump out of airplanes. One thing that most people don't know about you, I'm going to say 2 things that people don't know about you, right? One is that you used to jump out of airplanes in the Marines, and you're definitely afraid of heights, which cracks me up.
Terrifying.
And then 2, you train dogs for high level training, went through a really tough time with one of those deaths and losing one of those key, relationships in your life. And now you're a cat guy, right?
Even my coffee cup. Best cat dad ever.
Best cat dad ever. Wow.
The dog's name is Stella.
It's a big flip switch to go from dogs to cats, man. Or vice versa, by the way. Either one. Big
right. So it was funny. So Stella was the last service dog I trained, and I took her out of service when my daughter was 12. And so she'd be my daughter's babysitter. And people would go, hey, who's babysitting your kid? And I was like, nobody. And they're like, well, what do you mean nobody? And I was like, well, I got Stella. And they're like, what if somebody breaks in your house? I'm gonna be like, man, they thought they're gonna think they met a blender, right? Because Stella was
like that's not
man,
a
she knew how to
concern for
fight,
me.
and she was a great work dog, right? And so a year and a half ago, her mind was still there, but her hips, with Belgian Malinois, they experience this hip dysplasia, right?
Yep.
And if she just couldn't move, and so we had to take her down to the vet and put her down, and I was angry. I was just so mad. And as a matter of fact, I mean, we got about a mile from there, and I pulled over on the side of the road, and I was just walking up and down the road, kicking rocks. I was just mad about this.
Yeah.
Because she had been just this entity for my daughter, and I always felt safe for my daughter because of Stella. And so we were down there, and man, the poor vet, she was like, man, I'm sorry, but sometimes we have to euthanize our animals. And I was like, well, it was a hell of a lot easier euthanizing, people when I was in the Marines, because man, this is just, this was my dog, and then everybody's kind of sitting there like, oh, yeah. And then, and I said, so I was really down about it, right? Because she lived to be 16 years old, which is a long time for a Belgian Malinois.
Yeah.
Right. And so my wife goes, hey, we're going to go down and we're going to get a cat. I say, I ain't getting no cat. So I'm not a cat guy. I'm not getting a cat. She goes, you can go with me, help me pick one out, or I'm coming back with whatever one I find. So fine. So we get in there, and my cat's name is Hooter Smooch. And I call her my sweet smooches. And Laura calls her Hootie Hoo. And matter of fact, we have a sign at our house, for our address that says Hootie's Haven, right? And I'm like, we've totally gotten crazy over this cat. And I said, if we're going to get a cat, I'm going to train her like a dog. So she's leash trained. She goes on hikes with us. We took her to Alaska. I trained her.
You're the guy in the commercial. They got the commercial now about the cat, right?
Oh, I'm telling you, it was funny. My wife was like, how did you train her? And so my dad was up seeing me a couple months ago, and he's like, man, it's funny. That cat follows you everywhere you go. Anytime, the cat's always looking where you're at, and it's just, and I was like, yeah. And I just, it was just kind of funny. And as a matter of fact, my wife sent me a photo this morning. She got knocked over a bunch of stuff. She goes, she never misbehaves when you're here. She goes, she's acting out because you're not here. And, but it was just kind of funny. I was like, hey, I'm going to get a cat. I'm going to train it like a dog, because anything can be done, because you got to get comfortable with uncomfortable. Like, I'm terrified of heights. Like, when I say terrified, like, man, my place up in Colorado. Yeah. I go skiing all the time. And anytime that lift stops and it's sitting there swinging because some idiot screwed up getting off, right? And I'm sitting there like, and my wife, like, because she knows me well enough that she knows, but nobody else could tell. She's like, you're terrified right now, aren't you? I was like,
be cool, man. Be cool.
Hey, crap my pants right now. Like, this sucks.
That's cool.
But you got to get comfortable with uncomfortable, and then, go jump out of airplanes, go bungee jump, and do those things that you're terrified of, because there are always going to be things in life that you're scared of.
Yeah. Man, Jeremy Spann, this has been awesome. We got to wrap up. Just such a good time. Thank you so much for the time. I've learned so much. Say what you need, not what you want. Do what you need, not what you want to do. I mean, getting out of your comfort zone, perspective versus perception, the quadrant of death, ego, entitlement, blame, and shame, and the dangerous level of those. Respond, not react. So good. No mistakes. Learning opportunities. Data to back it up. You make your decisions, you data. And the story of the devil dogs and how they can. Most people don't know that story. It's so good. And then our good friend Brian Scudamore, right? The WTF. We're willing to fail. Go out there. But for my good friend Jeremy Spann, thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. Of course, I am always reminded of Semper Fidelis, Semper Fi, always faithful. Thank you on this Veterans Day for joining us. Jeremy Spann, you are always faithful, and I'm so blessed for our relationship and our friendship, my man. Thank you for joining me, brother.
Thank you, Trent. I was really honored that you reached out to have me do this on today of all days.
Yeah. For everybody else, Winners Find a Way every week, Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Join us and hear more great people like Jeremy Spann. You will be a winner. You will find your way.